The rain had been falling since dawn, soaking the sleeping city until it smelled of rust and old dreams. Under the faded arch of a bridge, a man wrapped in a torn brown blanket tried to stay dry. His name was Jaden Cole, once a proud construction worker, now just another forgotten face the world stepped over. He used to build homes for people. Now he didn't even have one. Still, Jaden wasn't bitter. Every morning, he rose before sunrise, brushed off the dust, and went around helping the traders at the nearby market lift their heavy goods. Some dropped coins in his palm, others gave him leftover bread. He smiled either way. It was better than sitting and pitying himself. Children on the street called him Uncle Jay. They liked his stories, the ones about courage, second chances, and faith. He told them because it reminded him he was still human. But tonight, as the thunder growled and the wind screamed, his faith felt small. He whispered into the dark, "God, if there's still a reason for me to be here, please show me." He didn't know that at that same moment, a woman was running through the rain, her path set to collide with his. A few streets away, Officer Kiera Thompson splashed through puddles, her boots slapping against the wet ground. She was 23, determined and fiercely brave, the youngest police officer in her unit. Her dark ponytail clung to her back as she chased a suspect through narrow alleys. The man she pursued had just robbed an old woman and stabbed a shopkeeper. Her radio crackled in her hand. "Officer Thompson, backup is 3 minutes out." "Copy that," she shouted breathlessly, never slowing down. She didn't look like the kind of person who belonged in the slums. Her polished voice, her confidence, her neat uniform. And for good reason. Kiera was secretly the only daughter of billionaire Henry Thompson, owner of Thompson Industries. Her father wanted her in an office, not on the streets. But Kiera wanted to feel the world her family's money couldn't buy. So she hid her identity, using her middle name at work and living alone in a small rented apartment. She didn't want people to salute her money, only her courage. The criminal turned into a dark lane under the old bridge, and Kiera followed without hesitation. The sound of rain on metal grew louder. The alley was narrow, reeking of smoke and garbage. When she cornered the man, he spun around, knife flashing. "Put it down," she shouted, her hand on her gun. "Back off," he hissed, "or I'll gut you." He lunged. They struggled, her radio fell, skidding across the ground. She blocked, twisted, but he was stronger. The knife caught her shoulder, pain slicing through the rain. She stumbled, heart pounding. And that's when she heard a voice behind the attacker. Rough, calm, familiar. "Hey, leave her alone." The criminal turned, startled. A tall, soaked figure stepped out from the shadows, Jaden. "Stay out of this," the man yelled. But Jaden didn't. He grabbed a rusted pipe and swung it just in time. The knife flew out of the attacker's hand. They wrestled in the mud, slipping and hitting the ground hard. Kiera, gasping through the pain, crawled toward her gun. But Jaden had already pinned the thief down. By the time the backup sirens wailed through the rain, the fight was over. "Easy," Kiera said softly, kneeling beside Jaden as officers dragged the suspect away. She noticed the deep cut on Jaden's arm, blood mixing with rain. "You're hurt." He gave a tired smile. "Guess I should have stayed out of it." She tore a piece of her uniform sleeve and tied it around his wound. "If you hadn't stepped in, I'd be dead." He shrugged. "You looked like you needed help." She frowned, studying his eyes. Kind but worn, brave but broken. "Why would you risk your life for a stranger?" Jaden looked up at the bridge above them, where raindrops fell through cracks like tears. "Because nobody deserves to die alone," he said simply. Something in those words sank deep into her chest. The ambulance came minutes later, but Jaden refused to ride in it. "There are people worse off than me," he said. "I'll be fine." So she insisted on walking him to the small roadside clinic nearby. The nurse patched him up and handed her a form. Kiera filled it quietly, glancing at him as he smiled at a little boy in the waiting room. He wasn't just a homeless man. He was something more, something she couldn't name yet. When she tried to thank him properly, he laughed softly. Just doing what anyone should. Before he could leave, She tore a piece of paper from her notepad and scribbled a number on it. "That's my number. If you ever need anything, food, a place to sleep, anything, call me." Jaden stared at the paper like it was made of gold. "You don't have to." "I want to," she said. For a moment, they just stood there. A police officer and a homeless man, two strangers joined by rain, blood, and something that felt like fate. Then she smiled. "What's your name?" "Jaden." "Nice to meet you, Jaden. I'm Kiera." He didn't know she was the daughter of one of the richest men in the country. And she didn't know that this moment, in the cold rain beneath a broken bridge, was the beginning of a love neither of them saw coming. The morning after the storm felt like the city had washed away its sins. The streets still glistened, and puddles mirrored the weak sunlight that fought to break through. Jaden sat on the curb near the market, his bandaged arm resting on his lap. Every time he moved it, he winced, but not because of pain. It was the memory of her face, the officer with the brave eyes and soft voice. He didn't even know her last name, just Kiera. And yet, it had been a long time since anyone had looked at him like he mattered. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small, rain-crumpled paper with her number. He smiled faintly. "Call me if you ever need anything." Her words replayed in his head like music. But Jaden was the kind of man who didn't like to need people. He had already lost too much: his job, his family, his pride. Depending on anyone felt like standing on thin ice. So he folded the note carefully and tucked it back into his pocket. Instead, he picked up a broom and began helping the market women sweep away mud from the night's flood. Across town, Kiera sat in her tiny apartment, sipping black coffee and staring at her uniform. Her shoulder was wrapped in a clean bandage, but she hardly noticed the pain. Her thoughts were still at that bridge. She had met hundreds of people on the job. Thieves, victims, liars, and heroes. But Jaden was different. There was something in his voice, something honest and tired but still full of goodness. For a while, she just sat there, thinking about how someone who had so little could still give so much. Then her phone buzzed. Her father. She sighed before answering. "Kiera," came the deep, commanding voice of Henry Thompson, the man who owned half the city's skyline. "You didn't come home last night. I had to hear from your assistant that you were working again in those dangerous areas." "Good morning, Dad," she said gently. "Don't good morning me," he snapped. "You were almost killed last year chasing drug dealers in the slums, and now this again? Kiera, I didn't raise you to risk your life like some street cop." She took a deep breath. "You raised me to fight for what's right. That's exactly what I'm doing." There was silence on the line for a moment. Then his voice softened. "I just don't want to lose you too, baby. You're all I have left." "I know, Dad," she whispered. "But you have to trust me." When the call ended, Kiera sat quietly. Being the daughter of a billionaire came with rules she never asked for. Her father wanted her safe behind walls of glass and security guards. But she wanted to see the real world, the one beyond tinted windows and private jets. And now, somehow, a homeless man from under a bridge had reminded her why she started all this in the first place. The next day, Kiera walked into the police station, her uniform crisp, her eyes determined. Her colleagues teased her about the injury. "Hey, Officer Thompson," her partner joked. "You wrestling crocodiles again?" "Something like that," she replied with a smile. But her mind wasn't on jokes. During her break, she went back to the bridge. The rain had dried, and sunlight danced on the puddles. She looked around, searching for Jaden. He wasn't there. She asked a few people. The fruit seller said he'd helped carry crates that morning. The kids said he had gone toward the old repair site. So she waited. She didn't even know why, just that she needed to see him again. Hours later, she saw him coming down the street, carrying a bucket and a hammer. His clothes were cleaner now, his face brighter. When their eyes met, he stopped, looking surprised. "Kiera?" he said softly, almost like he didn't believe she'd really come. "I told you to call if you needed anything," she said, smiling. "You didn't, so I came instead." Jaden chuckled. "You're persistent, officer. It's part of the job." She held out a paper bag. "I brought lunch. Hope you're not allergic to rice." He blinked, touched. "You didn't have to. I wanted to." They sat under a shade tree near the market, sharing fried rice and bottled water. For the first time in a long while, Jaden felt like a normal person again. Not invisible, not judged. They talked about everything. Her work, his past, dreams that seemed far away. "So, what did you used to do before all this?" she asked carefully. "I worked in construction," he said, staring at his hands. "Big company went bankrupt, and with no family, no savings. Well, one bad month became a bad year." Kiera listened quietly. "You could start again." He smiled sadly. "It's not that easy when you've lost everything, Kiera." "Maybe not," she said, looking at him. "But it's easier when someone believes you can." That moment, short and quiet, changed something in both of them. Weeks passed, and their friendship grew like sunlight after rain. Every evening after her patrol, Kiera would stop by the bridge. She'd bring food, stories from the station, and sometimes just silence. Jaden started fixing things around the market again, old roofs, broken fences, leaking pipes. People began calling him the repairman with a golden heart. He didn't care about money anymore. He cared about purpose. But something inside him also began to care about her. The way her eyes sparkled when she laughed, the way she treated him like a person, not a project. Still, every time she smiled at him, guilt tugged at his chest. He didn't belong in her world. If she ever found out he slept on cold cement at night, would she still look at him the same? Then one morning, everything changed. Jaden was cleaning an old gutter behind the market when he heard people whispering. Two men were reading from a magazine. "Yo, that's her," one said. "That police officer from the TV, Kiera Thompson. Says here her dad's one of the richest men in the country." Jaden froze. He snatched the magazine from their hands. There, on the glossy page, was her picture, smiling beside her father, both dressed in black suits at some charity event. The headline read, "Billionaire Henry Thompson's daughter chooses the badge over the boardroom." Jaden's hands trembled. His heart sank like a stone. He read the words again and again, hoping it was a coincidence. But no, the same smile, the same eyes. Kiera, a billionaire's daughter? His stomach twisted. Suddenly, the world around him felt wrong. The rice, the jokes, the laughter. All of it felt like a dream he had no right to. He left the magazine on the bench and walked away. That evening, Kiera came looking for him as usual. But the bridge was empty. His tools were gone. The children said he'd left hours ago. She called his name, but the wind swallowed her voice. She even dialed his number, but he never answered. Kiera stood there, staring at the spot where he used to sit, tears mixing with the dust on her face. She didn't understand. Had she done something wrong? Had he been hurt? She didn't know that miles away, Jaden was walking along the highway with a small backpack and a heavy heart, whispering to himself, "She deserves someone better. Not a man who sleeps under bridges." But destiny wasn't done with them yet. It was only drawing the line between their worlds, so it could later erase it in the most unexpected way. For the next few days, the bridge felt emptier than ever. Kiera still stopped by after her patrol, holding 2 lunch packs, one for her, one for Jaden. She would sit alone under the same shade tree, listening to the wind rush past, hoping he would show up. But he never did. The children who once ran to hug him now played silently. Even the market women noticed. "Officer Madam," one said kindly. "That man you used to talk to, he was a good man. Maybe life just pushed him somewhere else." Kiera forced a small smile, but inside, her heart ached. She wanted to believe he'd be back, but something told her he had left for good. That night, she lay awake in her small apartment, staring at the ceiling. Her mind kept circling the same question. Why did he leave without saying goodbye? When she closed her eyes, she saw his face again, gentle, calm, grateful. She remembered how he risked his life for her, how he smiled even when he was in pain, how he spoke about kindness like it was a gift, not a duty. And she realized something she hadn't admitted even to herself. She missed him, not just as a friend, but as someone who made her world feel honest. Meanwhile, far away on the outskirts of the city, Jaden stood by a half-finished construction site, looking up at a help-wanted sign. His arm was still bandaged, but he needed work, any kind of work. A foreman came out, sizing him up. "You can handle lifting?" "Yes, sir," Jaden said. "Then start tomorrow. Pay is small, but better than begging." "I'm not a beggar," Jaden said quietly, and the man looked at him again, realizing he'd struck a nerve. Jaden slept that night in a small worker's shed behind the site. No bed, just wooden planks. But at least it had a roof. He stared at the paper Kiera had given him, still folded in his pocket. He thought of her every time he touched it. He whispered, "You're from a world I don't belong to, Kiera. You deserve better." The wind carried his words into the night. A month passed. Kiera's wound healed, but her heart didn't. She had tried calling him over and over, even asked around the homeless shelters. No one had seen him. At the station, her partner noticed her distraction. "You good, Kiera?" he asked one day. "Yeah," she said, forcing a smile. "Just tired." He raised a brow. "You've been tired for 3 weeks." Kiera looked away. "Have you ever met someone you didn't expect to matter this much?" He grinned. "Aha! Now we're getting somewhere." She chuckled softly. "Never mind." But deep down, she knew the truth. She cared. And it scared her because caring made her vulnerable. That evening, she sat by the window as rain began to fall again, soft and steady. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Where are you, Jaden?" Miles away, the same rain fell over the construction site where Jaden worked. He had become one of the best hands there, quiet, hardworking, always the first to arrive and the last to leave. He'd earned the respect of the crew, even if he barely spoke about himself. One night, as the rain poured, he sat under a tin shelter and took out a notebook. It was small and worn, filled with sketches of houses, bridges, and structures he used to design before his life fell apart. His dream had always been to build something lasting, not just for money, but for people who needed homes. He still wanted that, even if the world had forgotten him. But every drawing somehow reminded him of her, the woman who had believed in him when he couldn't. He wondered if she had gone back to her world of glass towers and expensive cars. He hoped she had, and he prayed she would forget him quickly. A few weeks later, the city announced an emergency. The river that ran beneath the old bridge, their bridge, had started to flood again after heavy rain. Dozens of people were trapped nearby, and the structure itself was at risk of collapsing. Kiera was among the first officers deployed. When she arrived, chaos filled the air. Rushing water, shouting people, children crying. She quickly took command. "Get everyone to the east side," she ordered. "The west wing is unstable." Then she heard someone shout, "We need help here." A man stuck under the lower beam. She ran toward the voice. When she saw the trapped man, muddy, drenched, struggling to pull a child free, her heart stopped. It was Jaden. He looked thinner, but the eyes were unmistakable. He was holding up part of a broken wooden beam with his shoulder, keeping it from crushing a little girl. "Jaden!" she screamed. He looked up in shock, almost thinking he was hallucinating. "Kiera, hold on. I'm coming." She waded through knee-deep water, grabbed the girl, and helped pull her to safety. Then she turned back just as the structure groaned dangerously. "Jaden, you need to get out now." "I can't," he shouted. "If I move, this thing will fall." She didn't think twice. She splashed back toward him, pushing a large stick underneath the beam for support. "Let me help." "Kiera, please get out," he yelled. "If this thing comes down." "I'm not leaving you," she snapped. "You didn't leave me that night, remember?" The beam cracked loudly, and for a moment both froze. Then, with one final shove, they rolled out of the way just before the structure collapsed completely into the water with a crash. Silence followed, then applause from rescuers nearby. They were soaked, muddy but alive. Kiera's hands trembled as she looked at him. "Why did you come back here?" "I never really left," he said, breathing hard. "This is where I belong." She shook her head, tears mixing with rain. No, you belong anywhere you want. You just don't see it. Later, when the rescue operation ended, Kiera sat beside him under an ambulance tent. He had a small cut on his forehead, but he was smiling again. You shouldn't have risked your life, she said softly. He chuckled. Says the police officer who ran into a collapsing bridge. That's different. Not really, he said. We both just help people. She looked down. You disappeared, Jaden. Why? He sighed. Because I found out who you really are. Kiera's heart sank. So you knew. I saw the magazine, the mansion, the cars. You're from a world I can't touch. She swallowed hard. You think I care about that? You should, he said quietly. Because one day, your father or your friends will remind you who doesn't fit. She leaned closer, her voice trembling. You fit where your heart fits, Jaden. And mine has been missing something since the day you left. He froze, staring at her. For the first time, he didn't know what to say. That night, as he lay on a stretcher under a warm blanket, Kiera sat by his side. He drifted to sleep, and she whispered to him, You said nobody deserves to die alone. Well, nobody deserves to live unseen either. Morning sunlight filtered through the hospital blinds, soft and gold. Jaden blinked awake to the quiet hum of machines and the faint scent of disinfectant. His arm was wrapped neatly, his forehead bandaged. When he turned, Kiera was dozing in a chair beside him, still in her uniform, her hair messy from the long night. He smiled to himself. She looked nothing like a billionaire's daughter, just a woman who cared too much. He reached for the water on the table, and the sound woke her. Hey, she said, voice groggy but warm. You're up. Yeah, didn't expect to see you here. Well, you saved half the neighborhood, she said with a grin. You're not getting rid of me that easily. He chuckled, but the laughter faded as a shadow crossed the doorway. A tall man in a dark suit stepped in, hair silver at the temples, posture sharp, eyes that missed nothing. Kiera sat up straight. Dad. Jaden froze. Dad? Henry Thompson. The same man whose face appeared on billboards, newspapers, and magazine covers. The same name printed on skyscrapers. The same father he'd read about when he discovered Kiera's secret. Henry's gaze settled on Jaden, calm, assessing. So you're the young man who keeps risking his life for my daughter. Jaden tried to sit up, uneasy. Sir, I didn't know she was. Henry lifted a hand. Relax. You're recovering. Then, to Kiera. May I speak to him alone? Dad. Please. Kiera hesitated, then rose slowly. I'll be outside. Don't be hard on him. When she left, the room seemed colder. Henry studied Jaden in silence for a long moment. You worked construction once, didn't you? Jaden nodded cautiously. Yes, sir. Lost your job. Ended up on the streets. Henry's tone wasn't cruel, just factual. I did my homework before coming here. Jaden's stomach tightened. Of course he had. Men like Henry Thompson didn't show up without knowing everything first. I don't pity you, Henry continued. Many men lose everything, but few stand in the rain to save a stranger. You have courage, Mr. Cole. Jaden blinked, unsure if it was praise or a test. Thank you, sir. Henry clasped his hands behind his back. My daughter thinks highly of you. Maybe too highly. Jaden's chest ached. I didn't mean for any of this. I didn't even know who she was. I believe you. Henry's expression softened slightly. But understand this, you and I live in different worlds. In mine, people will judge her by the company she keeps. If word gets out that she's, how shall I put it, befriending a homeless man, it won't just embarrass me. It'll destroy her credibility. Jaden looked down. I never wanted to ruin her name. Henry sighed. I know. That's why I came, to make sure you don't. He placed a crisp envelope on the table. There's enough money here to start over. A small apartment, decent clothes, a clean slate. Take it and let her go. Jaden stared at the envelope like it was a snake. I don't want your money. Henry's voice lowered. You'd rather drag her into your struggle? Jaden met his eyes, steady. I'd rather earn my own way. For a heartbeat, silence filled the room. Then Henry nodded once. Good answer. He turned toward the door. You remind me of myself when I was young. Stubborn. But remember, pride doesn't build roofs, discipline does. Think carefully about what's best for her. When he left, Jaden sank back against the pillow, heart pounding. The envelope still sat there, heavy with temptation. Kiera walked in moments later. What did he say? Nothing important. Jaden lied. She frowned. You're a bad liar. He smiled faintly. I'm just a tired one. That afternoon, the doctor discharged him. Kiera insisted on driving him home, though home was a stretch. He still lived near the edge of the city, in a worker's compound beside the construction site. When the car stopped, she looked around sadly. You live here? Yeah. It's not much, but it's dry. She turned to him. You could stay with me for a few days, just until you recover. He shook his head. Kiera, that wouldn't be right. Why not? Because your father was right, he said quietly. We come from two different worlds. I don't belong in yours. She stared at him, eyes glassy. Stop saying that. You belong where you're respected, Jaden. And I respect you. He smiled, bittersweet. That's enough for me. Before she could reply, he gently closed the car door and walked toward the compound, leaving her watching his back disappear into the fading sunlight. Days passed. Henry Thompson didn't stop thinking about that young man's eyes. Steady, proud, unshaken. He decided to test him. One morning, Jaden arrived at the site to find a sleek black car waiting. A man in a suit stepped out. Mr. Cole? Mr. Thompson requests your presence. Jaden's stomach tightened. Again, he wiped his hands and followed. They drove through gleaming gates into a mansion that looked like something out of a dream. Polished marble, fountains, tall glass windows. Jaden felt out of place the second he stepped inside. Henry waited in his study, leaning against his desk. I see you didn't take the envelope. Jaden straightened. No, sir. Good. Then maybe I was wrong about you. He handed him a folder. I'm offering you a job. Jaden blinked. A job? As a site supervisor for one of my foundation projects. Low-cost housing for flood victims. You'll be paid fairly. No favors, no pity. You'll report to my engineers. Jaden hesitated. Why me? Henry smiled faintly. Because you know what it feels like to need a home. I trust that kind of man. Jaden swallowed hard. Thank you, sir. I won't disappoint you. See that you don't. For weeks, Jaden threw himself into work. The new project meant long days, safety helmets, blueprints, and honest sweat. The life he'd always wanted back. The workers respected him. The children from the nearby shelters called him Mr. J. He was finally rebuilding something inside and out. Yet every night, he caught himself looking at the skyline, searching for one particular apartment light. He missed her laugh, her stubbornness, her warmth. He missed Kiera. One Saturday morning, she showed up at the site in jeans and a baseball cap, pretending to be inspecting the foundation as part of the police security team. When he saw her, his heart stopped. What are you doing here? He asked, trying not to smile too widely. Checking the safety of the construction, she said innocently. Officer's duty. He crossed his arms. Aha, and that coffee in your hand. She grinned. Peace offering. They sat on a half-built staircase, sipping coffee and watching workers move like ants below. So, she said softly, my dad told me he offered you the job. He did. And you accepted. I needed the work. She nudged his arm. He also told me you refused his money. Jaden raised a brow. He told you that? He did. He said you've got more integrity than half the people he's ever hired. Jaden laughed quietly. That's a fancy way of saying I'm stubborn. Maybe, she said, smiling. But he respects you now. He looked at her, really looked at her, sunlight catching her eyes. Is that why you came? She hesitated, then whispered, No, I came because I missed you. He didn't answer, just stared at her hand resting near his. Then slowly, he placed his fingers over hers. Kiera, he said softly, You have no idea what you've done for me. She smiled. Maybe I do. That evening, Henry watched from his office window as they laughed together outside. For the first time, he didn't feel anger or fear, just understanding. His daughter was happier than she had been in years. His assistant entered quietly. Sir, should I tell Miss Thompson you're ready for dinner? Henry shook his head. Not yet. Let her enjoy her sunshine. He turned back to the window, watching the man who had once lived under a bridge now directing workers and smiling beside his daughter. A strange pride filled his chest. Maybe wealth wasn't just about what you owned, but what you built in others. That night, under the glow of streetlights, Kiera and Jaden walked through the site. The new houses stood half-finished but full of promise. She looked around and whispered, You're building homes for people who used to have none. He looked at her gently. Guess I'm just returning the favor. Favor? You gave me a home first, he said, touching his heart. Right here. Her breath caught, and for a moment the world went still. Then she leaned her head on his shoulder. Maybe that's what love really is. Helping each other find home. Jaden smiled. Then I guess I'm already home. As the applause faded, a black limousine rolled up to the site. Jaden wiped his hands. The air at the construction site buzzed with laughter and fresh paint. Months had passed since Jaden first stepped onto the dusty ground as a supervisor. And now the project stood proudly completed. Rows of neat, pastel-colored houses that shimmered under the morning sun. Children ran across the new pavements, their laughter echoing through the neighborhood. Jaden stood in the middle of it all, his safety helmet under his arm, pride swelling in his chest. For the first time in years, he wasn't the man under a bridge. He was the man who built one. The workers crowded around him, clapping and cheering. Boss, we did it, one shouted. No, you did it, Jaden said, grinning. Every nail, every brick. This is your victory too, expecting one of the project investors. But when the door opened, it was Henry Thompson himself, stepping out in a crisp gray suit, followed by Kiera in a flowing sky-blue dress. The workers gasped. Mr. Thompson, Jaden said quickly, trying to brush off the dust on his clothes. Henry smiled broadly. Relax, Jaden. This is your day. He shook Jaden's hand firmly. I came to see the final results for myself, and I must say, you've exceeded every expectation. The project finished ahead of schedule, under budget, and with more quality than most of my professionals could manage. Jaden blinked, stunned. Thank you, sir. I just wanted to give people homes they could be proud of. Henry nodded approvingly. And you did, which is why. He turned to his assistant, who handed him a sealed envelope. You're receiving a bonus payment, a very substantial one. Jaden hesitated. Sir, the pay I agreed to. This isn't charity, Henry interrupted. It's gratitude. You've earned every naira of it. When Jaden finally opened the envelope later that evening, his jaw dropped. The amount inside was nearly triple what he had expected, enough to change his life completely. A week later, Jaden signed the papers for a modest but beautiful home on the outskirts of the city. A 2-bedroom bungalow with a garden, white walls, and a small porch. When he stepped inside, he felt like he was walking into a dream. He ran his hand along the doorway and whispered, No more sleeping under bridges. Outside, a sleek silver SUV gleamed in the driveway. Another gift to himself, his first car since his downfall years ago. But unlike before, it wasn't about pride. It was about freedom, about being able to drive back to the same streets he once wandered with nothing in his pockets, and know he had survived. That evening, Kiera stopped by with a basket of food. You didn't tell me you bought a house, she said, pretending to pout. He laughed. I wanted to surprise you. She walked inside, eyes wide as she looked around. Jaden, this is beautiful. Not as beautiful as the person who believed I could build it, he said softly. Her cheeks flushed. You're getting smooth, Mr. Cole. He grinned. Maybe success makes me brave. They unpacked the food, eating on the floor because the furniture hadn't arrived yet. But neither cared. The sound of laughter filled the small house, bouncing off the empty walls like a melody. At one point, Kiera leaned her head on his shoulder. You know, she said quietly, when I met you, you were sitting under a bridge, freezing. Now look at you. You built a whole community. He smiled. And somehow, I still feel like I'm the lucky one. Why? Because I met you. She turned her head, eyes glistening with warmth. You saved my life, Jaden. He shook his head. No, you saved mine first. For a heartbeat, silence filled the air. Then, without overthinking it, he leaned closer. She didn't pull away. Their lips met, soft and unsure at first, then deepening. The kind of kiss that carries every word two souls never got the chance to say out loud. When they finally broke apart, Kiera laughed shyly. Well, I guess that's one way to celebrate new beginnings. He smiled. The only way that makes sense. A few days later, Henry invited Jaden to his office. The building towered over the city, all glass and steel, but Jaden walked in with confidence this time. Henry stood by the window watching the traffic below. You did something remarkable, Jaden. People talk about the quality of the homes, the fairness of your team, the honesty of your work. That kind of reputation is rare. Thank you, sir. I just did my best. Henry turned, smiling faintly. That's why I'm giving you another project. Bigger this time. The Unity Housing Development. 1,000 homes for displaced families. And I want you to lead it. Jaden's breath caught. 1,000 homes? Me? Yes, I trust you. Jaden swallowed hard. Sir, I don't know what to say. Then just say yes, Henry said, chuckling. And keep doing what you do best. Proving that character builds empires faster than money does. Jaden nodded, overwhelmed. I won't let you down. Henry extended a hand. You already haven't. They shook hands firmly, two men from different worlds now bound by respect. The rich man who once doubted, and the poor man who reminded him of integrity's worth. Over the next months, Jaden and Kiera's bond deepened. She visited the new site often, pretending it was for inspection. But everyone knew better. The workers would wink and whisper, Our boss's lady is here again. Sometimes she brought lunch for everyone. Other times she'd just sit with him beneath a half-built archway, watching the sunset. Their conversations grew softer, their glances longer. One evening, as they walked around the site hand in hand, she said, You realize my dad adores you now, right? He talks about you more than he talks about his business partners. Jaden laughed. That's probably because I actually finish my projects. She nudged him playfully. Cocky much? Just confident, he teased. She stopped walking, turned toward him, and smiled. Good, because I like confident. Then she rose on her toes and kissed him again. This time slower, certain, full of everything they'd been through together. The noise of the city faded. All he could hear was her heartbeat pressed against his chest. When they pulled away, she whispered, Promise me something, Jaden. Anything. No matter how big you get, don't stop being you. The man who helped a stranger in the rain. He touched her cheek. I couldn't even if I tried. That's who you fell for, right? She smiled. Exactly. Months later, they returned to the old bridge, the one where they first met. It had been rebuilt, stronger and safer, as part of Jaden's project. A small plaque at the side read, For those who once had nowhere to stand, may you always find your ground. J.C. Kiera traced her fingers over the letters, tears forming. You did this. We did, he corrected gently. They stood there quietly, hand in hand, watching the sunset bleed across the water. The same river that had once nearly taken both their lives now glowed golden and peaceful. Jaden turned to her, smiling. You know what's funny? What? I used to pray under this bridge, asking God to show me a reason to live. She tilted her head. And he squeezed her hand. Then he sent a stubborn police officer with a badge, a gun, and the most beautiful heart I'd ever seen. She laughed through her tears. You always know what to say. That's because you're my reason now, he whispered. And as the evening breeze brushed against them, she leaned in and kissed him again. Not out of pity, not out of gratitude, but out of love that had been tested by storms and had come out shining. The rooftop garden shimmered beneath strings of warm fairy lights. A soft wind carried the scent of roses and the faraway hum of the city. Kiera stood at the balcony, looking breathtaking in a midnight blue dress. When she turned, Jaden was already watching her. Hands in his pockets, nerves in his smile. "Why are you looking at me like that?" she teased. "Because I still can't believe you said yes to dinner," he said. "And because I'm about to ask for something bigger." Her brows lifted. "Bigger?" He took a slow breath, then dropped to one knee. The city lights glowed behind him, turning the moment golden. "Kiera Thompson," he said, voice steady but soft. "When I met you, I had nothing. You looked past my brokenness and saw someone worth saving. You became my reason to rebuild. Will you marry me?" For a heartbeat she just stared, stunned, and then tears blurred her eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "Of course yes." Jaden slipped the ring onto her finger. Simple silver, a single diamond that caught the light just right. Fireworks burst somewhere across the lagoon as if the universe had planned it. They laughed and held each other, unaware that from a nearby terrace, a phone camera was clicking. By dawn, the photo had circled the internet. Hashtag from bridge to billionaire trended worldwide. Morning shows replayed clips of Jaden's story, the homeless man who saved a police officer who turned out to be a billionaire's daughter. Kiera scrolled through her phone, half amused, half shy. "You're trending, Mr. Cole." Jaden flipped pancakes in the small kitchen. "Great. Maybe I'll autograph syrup bottles next." She laughed, hugging him from behind. "You deserve this happiness." For a week, the world loved them. Invitations for interviews poured in. Magazines begged for wedding exclusives. Henry Thompson, usually private, gave a proud statement. "Jaden Cole is living proof that character is the highest currency. I'm proud to welcome him into our family." Everything glowed until the glow twisted. It started quietly. A single post on a gossip blog. Leaked documents suggest 25 million Nigerian nairas missing from the Thompson housing project. Source claims Jaden Cole diverted funds to a private account. Kiera frowned at the screen. "Who makes up this nonsense?" Jaden shrugged. "Ignore it. Internet rumors vanish fast." But this one didn't vanish. It multiplied. By nightfall, every tabloid carried the story. Talk shows questioned his honesty. Strangers dissected his past. From bridge to billionaire or bridge to betrayal? Can we trust the man who came from nothing? The next morning, Jaden's accountant called. His accounts were under investigation. Payments halted. Contracts on pause. He exhaled slowly, phone pressed to his ear. "All right, I'll cooperate fully." Kiera rushed to his side. "We'll fight this." "We will," he said, but the tightness in his voice betrayed the weight pressing on him. By afternoon, the media camped outside his compound. Reporters flashed cameras through the gate. Neighbors whispered, but Jaden didn't hide. He opened the front door and stepped out. The crowd erupted, questions flying like stones. "Mr. Cole, did you steal the funds? Are you using the Thompson name to cover up fraud? Where's the money, sir?" He raised his hands slightly. "No comment until the truth is verified. I'm cooperating with investigators." "Are you guilty?" someone shouted. Jaden met their eyes through the fence. "I built those houses so families could sleep safely. I'd never take a coin from that dream." Flashbulbs exploded, but his voice stayed calm. After a moment, he turned and walked back inside, closing the door gently, like a man shutting out noise, not running from it. Inside, Kiera sat on the couch, shaking her head. "You don't have to face them alone." "I do," he said softly. "Running would make me look guilty. Standing here tells them I'm not afraid." She looked at him with tears in her eyes. "That's the man I fell in love with." That evening, Henry Thompson arrived. The house lights were dim, the tension thick. "Dad," Kiera began, but Henry raised a hand. "I just want to talk to Jaden." Jaden stood, shoulders square. "Sir." Henry studied him for a long moment. "The board is furious. They think you tarnished our family name." "I didn't," Jaden said firmly. "I want to believe that, Henry replied. But until we know for sure, I have to suspend all joint projects. I understand, Jaden said, though his chest tightened. Henry's eyes softened slightly. If you're innocent, the truth will stand. But I have to protect Kiera. Kiera rose quickly. Dad, he's not. Henry turned to her. I know you love him, but love doesn't erase consequences. Then he faced Jaden again. Prove them wrong, son. Do it with evidence, not emotion. When he left, silence filled the room. Kiera sat beside Jaden, her hand slipping into his. You could fight this publicly, she said. A press conference, a statement. He shook his head. Every word I say becomes another headline. I'll fight it the only way that works. Quietly, with facts. But the noise. Let them talk, he interrupted gently. They'll get tired before I will. She looked at him with admiration and pain. You're the calmest storm I've ever met. He smiled faintly. That's because I've been through worse storms than rumors. Kiera stayed with him that night, ignoring every call from the press. They cooked dinner together just to feel normal. Between the chopping and laughter, she looked at him and said, You could have run, Jaden. No one would blame you. He set the knife down and smiled softly. Running is what people expect from the guilty. Standing is what the innocent do. Then he added, And besides, if I ran, who would make your favorite stir-fry? She laughed, the sound breaking the tension. He pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers. We'll get through this, Kiera. Her voice was steady now. Together. Outside, flashes still popped beyond the gate. But inside the small house, the house built on honesty, patience, and love, two people held each other against the noise, choosing faith over fear. For a week, the city couldn't stop talking. Every news channel had an opinion about Jaden Cole. Every gossip blog replayed the same sentence. Where there's smoke, there's fire. Yet, inside the Thompson mansion, Kiera refused to believe it. She'd spent her days between the police unit and her father's office, trying to piece together how something so impossible could even be rumored. The audit reports Jaden had provided checked out, but the alleged leak to the media had used doctored bank screenshots. Someone wanted him destroyed, and they were close enough to the family to know exactly where to strike. That evening, Kiera stood by her father's office window, arms crossed, watching the city lights blink below. Dad, she said softly, I think this isn't about money. Henry looked up from his desk. What do you mean? It's about you. She turned to him. About the company. About who inherits it. He frowned, leaning back in his chair. You think this has something to do with business politics? I'm sure of it, she said. Who else would risk fabricating evidence against Jaden unless they were threatened by him? Henry rubbed his chin, deep in thought. The only person who'd gain from ruining Jaden's name is someone who fears I'd trust him more than them. His eyes narrowed slightly. And there's only one man who's acted uneasy since your engagement. My co-founder, Richard Hale. Kiera froze. Uncle Richard? Yes, we started Thompson Hale Holdings together. He owns 40%. Henry sighed. But his son, Ethan, has always believed the company should be his inheritance. And now that you're planning to retire soon, Kiera began. They think I'll hand it all to you and Jaden, Henry finished grimly. The next morning, Kiera walked into the police station in plainclothes, flashing her badge to the IT division. I need help tracing the digital source of a financial leak, she told the head technician, a bespectacled woman named Liza. High profile, extremely, keep it off record. Within hours, the data trail began to unravel. The first upload of the fake bank statement came from a private server registered under a corporate name, RH Innovations Ltd. Liza frowned. That's not random. That's owned by someone with deep pockets. Kiera's heart pounded. R.H. Richard Hale. Liza's fingers flew across the keyboard. The account that made the upload used an encrypted address, but guess what? It logged in once from a secondary device. A laptop registered to Ethan Hale. Kiera's breath caught. They did this together. Do you want a warrant? Liza asked quietly. Kiera nodded. Yes, but make it airtight. If they're powerful enough to frame someone, they're powerful enough to fight back. By afternoon, the trap was set. Henry called a board meeting, pretending it was to discuss the company's reputation amid the scandal. Richard and his son Ethan walked in confidently, both in tailored suits, faces calm but proud. "Henry," Richard said with a sympathetic smile, "this whole Jaden mess must be exhausting. Maybe you should take a break and let us handle things for now." Henry forced a polite laugh. "You're probably right. But before that, there's something I'd like to clear up." He pressed a button on the remote. The large screen behind his desk flickered on, showing security footage stills and digital trace evidence. Richard's smile vanished. "This," Henry said slowly, "is the IP address used to leak the false transaction records that almost destroyed my future son-in-law. And here," he pointed at the screen, "is proof that it originated from your company's server." Ethan's jaw tightened. "That's absurd." Kiera stepped forward from the corner, her badge gleaming. "It's not absurd, Ethan. The police's cyberforensics traced every click, every timestamp. You left fingerprints all over it." Richard stood abruptly. "You're accusing me of sabotaging my own company?" "I'm accusing you of sabotaging your partner's trust," Henry said quietly. "You've worked beside me for 30 years, Richard." "Why?" Richard's voice shook with anger. "Because you were going to hand everything to a stranger, a street boy who wormed his way into your daughter's heart and our empire. My son should be the next in line, not him." Ethan slammed his fist on the table. "You think we'd watch everything you built go to a beggar? Never." The room fell silent. Henry's face hardened, his disappointment sharp enough to cut air. "You could have spoken to me. Instead, you chose lies and betrayal." At that moment, Kiera nodded toward the doorway. Two plainclothes officers entered quietly, followed by Liza holding a folder of evidence. "Richard Hale, Ethan Hale," Kiera said formally. "You're under arrest for conspiracy, cyber forgery, and defamation." Ethan shouted, "You can't do this." Liza handed her the warrant. "We already did." The officers read them their rights. Cameras clicked from the hallway as they were escorted out, faces pale with disbelief. Henry slumped into his chair, rubbing his temples. 30 years of partnership, gone. Kiera knelt beside him. "You still have your integrity. That's what built this company, not greed." He gave a weary smile. "You sound like him." Outside, reporters swarmed again, but this time the questions were different. "Mr. Cole, how does it feel to be vindicated?" "Sir, were you aware of the conspiracy? Will you still marry Miss Thompson?" Jaden stood on the front steps, wearing a plain white shirt and calm expression. "I never stopped believing the truth would speak," he said simply. "And as for marriage, some bonds are built strong enough to survive any storm." Cameras flashed. The moment became front-page news within hours. That evening, the Thompson home was quieter than it had been in weeks. Henry called Jaden into the study. "I owe you an apology," he began. "I doubted when I should have trusted." Jaden shook his head. "You were protecting your family, sir. I understand." Henry smiled faintly. "Maybe, but I also learned something. When the storm hit, you didn't hide. You stood tall. That's the mark of a leader." He slid a folder across the table. "That's the new contract. The board has reinstated all your projects and added 3 more. Affordable housing in 3 states. I want you to head them." Jaden's throat tightened. "Sir, that's deserved," Henry interrupted warmly. "And when you marry my daughter, I'll be proud to call you family. Not because of business, but because of your heart." Jaden smiled, humbled. "Thank you, sir." "Now go," Henry said, chuckling. "I believe someone's waiting to celebrate." He found Kiera in the garden, where fairy lights twinkled above the roses again, the same place where he had once proposed. She turned as he approached, eyes soft. "Did you hear the news?" she asked. He nodded. "They're behind bars. Justice caught up faster than I expected." Kiera stepped closer. "I knew it would. Truth might walk slow, but it never stops moving." He smiled. And you never stopped believing. I couldn't, she said. You didn't just save my life once. You saved my faith in people. Jaden took her hands gently. Then let's start again. No rumors, no shadows. Just us. She nodded, tears brimming. Just us. He leaned down and kissed her, soft at first, then deeper, the kind that ends a war and begins peace. When they finally pulled away, Kiera whispered, "You're still trending, you know?" He laughed quietly. Hopefully for the right reasons this time. Definitely. The sun rose over the Thompson estate like a promise kept. Soft music drifted through the garden. The same one where Jaden had first knelt under fairy lights and a hopeful sky. But today, it wasn't just two hearts making a promise. It was an entire world watching love win its final battle. The air shimmered with color. Rows of white roses lined the aisle, their petals catching the morning light. Guests whispered, phones flashed, and at the far end, Kiera appeared. Radiant, calm, graceful, her white gown flowing like a whisper of heaven. Henry Thompson stood beside her, dressed in a gray suit, eyes shining with quiet pride. "Ready, sweetheart?" he asked. Kiera smiled through tears. More than ever. As she walked down the aisle, every step felt like a memory. The rain, the bridge, the nights of fear and hope, the days of fighting lies. And there, waiting at the altar, was Jaden. No longer the man from under the bridge, but the man who had built one strong enough for both of them to walk across. When their eyes met, the crowd disappeared. There was only him, only her, and the quiet, unshakable truth between them. The ceremony was simple but sacred. Tund, one of Jaden's old construction friends, officiated with a grin. When they said love builds homes, I didn't think they meant literally. Everyone laughed, but the laughter faded into emotion when he continued, voice thick with meaning. These two didn't meet in a ballroom, he said. They met in a storm. When life gave them every reason to walk away, they stayed. And that's what love is. Staying. Even when the roof leaks and the lights flicker. He turned to Jaden. Do you, Jaden Cole, promise to keep building this home? Not just with bricks and beams, but with kindness, trust, and a love that never runs? Jaden looked at Kiera, his voice soft but sure. I do. Every day, every season, every storm. And you, Kiera Thompson, do you promise to walk beside him? To protect the dream that started under a bridge, and never let the world tell you who you're supposed to love? Her eyes glistened. I do. Because he's the only home I've ever needed. When they kissed, applause filled the air. Cameras clicked, confetti fluttered, and Henry wiped a tear before pretending to cough. Dad, Kiera teased. Are you crying? I'm allergic to happy endings, he said gruffly, making everyone laugh again. Later, during the reception, Jaden stood before the crowd. No speech cards, no rehearsed words. Just honesty. When I first came to this city, he began, I slept under a bridge that was falling apart. I thought my life had ended there. But God had other plans. He sent someone who didn't see my poverty. She saw my purpose. Kiera, you didn't just give me love. You gave me back my name. The audience clapped, some wiping their eyes. Kiera took the microphone next, her smile glowing. And you, Jaden, she said, showed me that love isn't a headline or a brand. It's in the small moments, in trust, in laughter, in believing even when the world doubts you. You're not my fairy tale. You're my reality. And that's better. The hall erupted in applause again. Henry raised his glass. To love that rebuilds. And to a man who taught us all that home isn't where you live. It's who you love. A few mornings after the wedding, Jaden sat in his new office at the foundation headquarters, overlooking the city. The framed wedding photo sat beside his desk, Kiera laughing, wind in her hair, his hand in hers. But what caught his attention wasn't the photo. It was the letter on his table, marked with the seal of the state penitentiary. He opened it slowly. It was from Richard Hale. Jaden, I don't expect forgiveness, but I owe you truth. My envy blinded me. I thought I was protecting my legacy, but I was destroying my integrity. You were never the threat. My pride was. I'm sorry. Richard. Jaden sat back quietly, the weight of the words sinking in. For a long time he said nothing. Then he stood, took his car keys and drove. At the prison, Richard looked older, his once proud eyes dim but honest. Ethan sat beside him, silent, guilt written across his face. You didn't have to come, Richard murmured as Jaden sat across from them. I did, Jaden said, because I couldn't start my new life while carrying anger from the old one. Richard looked down. I ruined your name. You didn't ruin it, Jaden replied gently. You tested it. And it stood. For a moment, the older man's shoulders shook. Not from pride, but from relief. Ethan spoke next, voice trembling. My father built a company, but you built a heart in it. I'm sorry for trying to destroy that. Jaden nodded slowly. Learn from it. Use your time to rebuild what greed broke. Forgiveness doesn't erase consequences, but it opens a door for change. As he rose to leave, Richard whispered, You're a better man than I ever was. Jaden smiled softly. No, I just remembered what it feels like to have nothing, and how dangerous it is to forget. Outside the prison gates, Kiera was waiting by the car. How was it? She asked. Necessary, he said quietly. Sometimes you need to look back, not to live there, but to close the door properly. She nodded, taking his hand. You did the right thing. He looked at her and smiled. We both did. They stood for a moment, watching the sun climb higher, warm and steady. The same light that had once glinted off raindrops when they met under a bridge.